Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, July 3rd, 2025, and today we're talking about seed storage, sweet potato spacing to maximize space, and burying rotten wood chips. So let's do it. All right, happy Thursday and happy July 3rd, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Things are good here. It's going to be wildly warm this weekend, again, here in Kentucky. So lots of misting the lettuce in the field and misting the farmer all the time. And the farmer's kids as well, probably. They enjoy that. I see that our friends over in Europe are working their way through a heat wave themselves. So hope you all are faring well over there. And everyone else in the world who's dealing with whatever wild weather you are dealing with. I hope you're getting through it. Also, a reminder that we will not be doing a show tomorrow, but I won't be off technically. I'll still be doing a bunch of farm stuff. Most farmers will, I think. I mean, it's a Friday. It'll be a harvest day. I honestly don't think I've taken a 4th of July off in years, but I have had to wrangle my sheep in the middle of the night because of fireworks, so that's fun. It's also worth remembering, and maybe I'll go more in depth on this in an episode at some point, that fireworks are shockingly bad for the environment. They expel heavy metals and plastics and various chemicals into the air and eventually into our water and food, while also disrupting the migratory habits of birds and other animals. Domestic animals, such as we call them pets, and livestock, of course, bear the brunt of it, and we lost a beloved cat to fireworks one year who ran off and never came back. I'll link a good review in the show notes if you need more excuses to be like, yeah, wait, why do we celebrate stuff with large-scale pollution events? Ecologically, it would be hard to pick a worse celebration than launching loud, bright chemical bombs into the air. Anyway, as the tradition goes on Thursdays, we're going to bust out some Patreon questions. Today's first Patreon question comes to us from Kate Maudsley at Leroyd Street, who writes, quote, "Hey, from Queensland, Australia, Jesse. I'm struggling with seed storage for small seeds/quantities, i.e. tomatoes. I bought a couple of Diamond Art storage systems. I guess you could think like these are like little tiny shelves with a bunch of drawers for storing tiny things, which are helpful in organization and containing contamination spreading. Weevils or similar were obvious through the containers. I can also take the whole box outside to sow in most weather and the seeds stay dry, but it's annoying because by repackaging seed into the container, I don't know, A, where the seed came from, and B, if they were contaminated before or after I opened them. When not strewn all over my dining room table, my larger seeds/quantities are dumped in a big plastic storage box. I organize them vaguely into season and types, etc., which works okay until I'm looking for something, and then it's a mess again. I have my pea seeds in old glass coffee bottles. That's great to keep the mice away, and I can see the seeds, but have noticed condensation in the bottle when they've been outside in the sun for a while, and I will break the bottle at some stage for sure. I'm hoping you and others could share photos of your storage systems that keep your seeds organized while being safe from weather/pests. Thanks for your time and information, Kate." End quote. All right. Thanks, Kate. Love it. And you all are probably deep in your winter down there in Australia, gearing up for your springs. So seeds and storage are heavy on your minds. So by the sounds of it, you're kind of taking your seeds out of your containers and then out of their like seed packages and then sorting them in drawers. Honestly, as annoying and cumbersome as seed packets kind of are, like you talked about with having them all in a big plastic box or whatever, especially when you consider the size of their contents, I would probably not recommend taking them out of their packages for a number of reasons. First is the organizational element you mentioned. If you drop the seed container or a label disappears or any number of accidents occur, poof, there it all goes. Second is the moisture element. It's hugely important to seed health and germination rates. If moisture fluctuates too much, that will significantly reduce the germination. The seed packages actually, to some extent, help moderate the moisture while also protecting from certain pests. Pests is another big one. Putting all those seeds into loose drawers like that is perhaps inviting to weevils and potentially other critters, which, although you can see them, like you mentioned, you don't want to see them. My recommendation for that would be to simply keep them in the packages. Now, what we have found works best for us is to simply keep the seeds in small Tupperware containers with lids. I have them divided, well, honestly, I can't really remember why I I chose the division system that I did, but you can divide them however you want. For instance, I have a lettuce, beans, corn, and squash container because that makes sense. I have a brassicas container and so on. All of these containers live in our cooler. I take the packets just out as I need them, put them into a cloth tote that I keep in the cooler, and then that is how I transport them back and forth outside to inside. So I will take that whole tote outside, I will seed the trays I need to seed, and then I will bring them all back and put them back into their respective containers. Oh, kitty cat. You want to say hi? What do you have to say for yourself? She's still around. This is just kind of how she rolls. You look super happy. Let's see if I can figure out where I was. So all the empty seed packets go into a separate bag for like organic certification, or they did when we were certified at least. You have to keep those packages so that the organic certifier can double check that you actually had the number of seeds that you said you did or whatever. And that's basically it. The boxes protect from moisture, rodents, etc. Also keeping them in the cooler will help with the weevils, because they don't move as fast in cold temperatures. Taking that diamond box that you mentioned outside probably does build up a lot of humidity and heat. And although heat fluctuations are not as hard on seed as moisture, the two together is definitely not ideal. Now, I will say the one seed I do take out and mix up intentionally is my Salanova seed that I do also put into glass jars like you mentioned. However, anytime I take those outside, I make sure to make the lids like nice and loose so that they can breathe, but not so loose that they can spill. And I keep the jars out of the sun. It's not my favorite system because it's like a tiny greenhouse, but because I mix the Salanova varieties together along with some Muir, then I have to have some sort of makeshift container for them. There are innumerable ways to do all this. Just keep the basics in mind. Keep it cool, keep it dry, keep it dark and protected. Those are the things that seeds need, and your seeds should be good to go and have, reasonable longevity. All right, I hope that was helpful. Up next, we will hear from some of you all about how your seasons are going, and then talk bush sweet potatoes as an interplant of sorts. BRB.
Hello, this is Neil from Central Illinois. So far, growing has been outstanding this year. I have a lot of cauliflower and cabbage and corn in the mix.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe, but what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Madeline Messick, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. First of all, I am so excited to be an official Patreon after watching your channel for several months now. I should have done it sooner. And I am so thankful for all the knowledge and research it has helped me to start my newest garden at my new home." Thanks. That's very cool to hear. My question for you is, how would you recommend spacing bush sweet potatoes in a 3-foot wide by 20-foot long growing space? My beds are all 4 feet wide. However, I have one bed that I have planted some Roma tomatoes, not the beans, on the edge with the support of a 16-foot long cattle panel. As the tomatoes grow, I will continue weaving them through the panel as support so they stay mostly contained to just have that side of the bed. So with that said, I have about 3 other feet width of the bed to plant my sweet potatoes in, and I'm not sure how many I can/should fit. They are a bush variety, Vardaman, but I have never grown sweet potatoes before, so I have no previous knowledge to experiment with. Thanks for your help, end quote. All right. Now, I did respond to this a while back when it came up to make sure Madeline was advised in a timely manner, as I do try to do on the Patreon page where I can. And Patreon members, make sure to add the alarm bells to your posts, to your questions, so I know that you need that question answered ASAP. The July thread is up also, so go ahead, ask away. Anyway, thank you for this, Madeline, and for the support. You rock. Okay, so bush varieties of sweet potatoes do not vine quite as much as the vining varieties. That's why they call them bushes, but they do spread quite a bit still. So similarly to bush varieties of winter squash, the bush varieties of sweet potatoes vine out like 4 feet instead of, say, 8 feet. Generally, bush varieties of things are better on a small sort of intensive scale, though I should say I've never actually grown any bush varieties of sweet potatoes, so I can't tell you how they taste or perform or any of those good things. We grow one called the Golden Nugget sweet potato. It's an heirloom sweet potato we've been growing for 16 years now, and is really well adapted to our area. It's very sweet and delicious. But in terms of saving space, bush varieties of sweet potatoes and winter squash, etc., are the way to go because you don't want to be stepping on the vines of either of those crops in general if you can help it, because it will reduce yields. Now, my recommendation for this would be to plant the sweet potatoes about 8 inches from the bed edge at 8 to 12 inches apart in the row. So come off a little bit from the edge of the bed and plant them about a foot apart or a little less. My only concern would be that the leaves of the sweet potatoes would trap a little bit too much moisture at the base of the tomatoes, but it's not a huge concern because by the time they reach way over there, my guess is that the tomatoes will have grown quite tall and maybe even set the majority of the fruit. They plan to set at that point in the season, depending on your climate and sunlight and varieties, etc. If, however, you start to see any mold/fungi forming around the base of the tomato plants and they are still very much producing, you could at very least cut the sweet potato leaves out around the plants just to keep the airflow going there. The sweet potatoes will rebound quickly, but it would be a good idea to just try and keep that ventilation as high as possible around the base of the tomato plants to prevent fungal diseases. That may also mean pruning those lower leaves of the tomatoes, removing them to ensure good airflow. Anyway, I do kind of love sweet potatoes around other crops. For instance, this year I have a bed of broomcorn down the middle of a sweet potato bed. I'm not 100% sure that one's going to work out because that's a lot of nutrient need, but I do have 2 other beds without broomcorn to compare them to. Why broomcorn? Because who doesn't need like 75 brooms? I don't even know why I have to answer that question. Also, I've never grown broomcorn. It's kind of exciting. But I've also used sweet potatoes under popcorn beds. So basically a bed of sweet potatoes, bed of popcorn, bed of sweet potatoes, bed of popcorn. And the sweet potatoes kind of sprawl out and shade a little bit. So they kind of retain some of that moisture for the popcorn. That works out pretty well. I've always thought it would be fun to use sweet potatoes as a ground cover for crops like tomatoes, which is sort of what you will be doing here, as the leaves will help to some extent with the moisture retention in the soil. My one unknown in your example is the competition for nutrients, as these 2 crops do tend to share relatively similar levels of the soil, but they should be far enough away from one another to not compete too heavily. Please do let us know how it goes. Otherwise, let's take a quick break to hear from some of you all, and when we return, we will take on a question about buried wood chips. Be right back.
My name is Colleen. I do Colleen's Greens in Michigan. We are a Zone 5B area. This is my main garden. We also have a lettuce garden over there in the mulch bed and a winter squash garden over here behind me.
My name is Bill Price. I live in north central Idaho in the northwest U.S. My garden has 10 raised beds, 3 by 14 feet. Everything seems to be growing pretty normal. A few things may be a bit slow.
Hey, Farmer Jesse. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. After a long, extended, dank, cold spring, everything is starting to come together. I have 3 tiny little plots, and everything's growing like a weed right now in Omaha, Nebraska.
All right, our final Patreon question of this Thursday comes to us from Sydney, who writes, "Hi, Farmer Jesse. I've been following your channel for a couple years now and just realized you had a daily podcast." Yes, we do. We shifted our model to something more communally minded this year after a somewhat failed attempt at a market garden last year here in Western Vermont, Zone 5A/B. A side effect of that failure, learning process, was that a large pile of mulch dropped from a local arborist for our pathways was left to decompose for the last year. We decided to mulch our beds below a relatively thick 50 by 50 topsoil/mix, 4 to 6 inches deep, and a layer of 2-sided plastic mulch, which I hate, but we didn't manage to kill weeds prior to the start of the season. Thinking it had a sort of hugelkultur vibe with lots of great looking mycelium and could create a little distance from a somewhat dense clay soil below. We did zero research on this and have 4 beds prepped and ready to plant. My question is, was this a dumb or viable idea? I imagine that there would be some conflict when it comes to root veggies like carrots, but are we causing any other problems by doing this? End quote. Okay then, thank you for this fun question, Sydney, and I welcome specific contextual challenges like this, you all. It's very fun. So the first thing that comes to mind is that even if you had done a lot of research on this, I'm not 100% sure that you would have found much, if anything. At least not anything super helpful or like particularly scientific. Not saying people haven't buried partially decomposed wood chips and tried to plant into whatever was on top of those. I'm sure they have, and someone watching this may have some insight on it and can chime in about it. But assuming that your partially decomposed wood chips were relatively far along in that process after a year, what you are likely to see is some diminished growth in your first year, but honestly, that may not last super long. It just depends on the moisture, the type of wood chips, the temperatures, and maybe to some extent what you grow there. And I don't honestly know that carrots would be a problem, or I don't know if they'd be a problem or not. That's a reasonable assumption. But for instance, a grower whose work I have long admired is Jared Smith of Jared's Real Food out there in California, who for at least a while was making lasagna beds with compost and straw, then sowing carrots into that kind of immediately before it was all decomposed. While we were there, we saw him pull big, beautiful carrots out of those beds with no issues. Now, would it be the same with wood chips? Maybe not. And perhaps my biggest concern would be, arthropods or rodent damage over maybe any sort of nutrient thing. Though, of course, who knows? It could be, fungal issues. Of course, there's not a ton you can or necessarily should do to, quote unquote, fix that. You could potentially add some extra compost to those beds to mitigate any nitrogen tie-up from the maybe perhaps not very decomposed wood chips that may have snuck their way in there. You could also sow a cover crop to see how it performs. Its growth might also aid in the decomposition of those wood chips a little bit. In the past, I've done a few trials with lasagna layers in terms of hay, cardboard, and straw, and those mostly turn out fine. Honestly, I've always wanted to do more long-term experiments like what you're talking about, building new beds over carbonaceous materials such as rotten wood chips, and allowing them to decompose for a year, probably under cover crop before planting, sort of like you mentioned, like a lazy hugelkultur like that. But also, it's a lot of work. So anyway, keep us updated on how it all goes. Maybe you will learn something from a crop or two that could be helpful or insightful. Thanks also for signing up, you all. We really appreciate the support. It really is what makes this keep going and growing, of which it is doing both. Anyway, that's it for this Thursday and this week. No show tomorrow. Don't forget that No Till Growers is now officially a 501c3 nonprofit, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Tell her Jesse sent you. I mean, I don't know where, she probably assumes that, but you can tell her that too. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. You can hear it. I can't hear it. Pick up a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to no new signups today. So we shall never know how or what happened to our flower farmer there on the town square. But sometimes that's just the way stories roll. Have a great weekend, you all. We will see you back here on Monday, bright and afternoony. Bye. My name is Jesse, Zone 6B in Kentucky, and my season is coming along nicely. Milpa garden looks pretty good. Baby watermelon, sunflowers, happy pepper bed, basil days, cherries, and 75 brooms.